Alright, so the format, no, wrong. Alrighty, my name is Kelsey and we're about to get very, very nerdy with my December wrap-up. So it is time to talk about the final books that I read at the very, very end of 2022. I went into this month with I wouldn't say low expectations, but I'd kind of had a dip at the end of last year. I really wasn't reading a whole lot as far as what I wanted to plan, as far as what I had planned to read. I was still reading a bunch. I still think the lowest I got down to was 8 or 9 books, I think, for a month. And which is really, really good, but from what I had been reading before, it was kind of starting to slow, and so I was worried that December was going to be pretty low. So if you remember, my husband helped me out and picked a few books for me to read in December. I had some Christmas books I wanted to read, some holiday things, and I really didn't know what I was going to get into, and then I ended up having an amazing month. I read 16 books in December. Now I will say, the year rounded out with a bunch of graphic novels, and I started the month with a bunch of historical romances, and I get through those types of books really, really quickly. So I did set myself up pretty well, but I had some really amazing time off. I was able to work from home for most of December, like I've mentioned before on this channel, and we had a good chunk of time off for the holidays. My parents were here for a while, so I was able to get really cracking on a lot of reads, and then I went through a bunch and loved a lot of them. So we have a lot to talk about today. I will try to keep this short and sweet because I did do a couple of different vlogs throughout the month of December. So as usual, I will leave them linked above and down below if you'd like to check out my in-depth thoughts, because I am going to try to get through those relatively quickly when I talk about the books that I read for those videos. But first, let's dive into the stats. So in the month of December, like I mentioned, I read 16 books, and that was over 3,971 pages and about 95.5 hours listened. And that was over the course of 4 audiobooks, 4 physical books, 1 ebook, and 7 of mixed from above. My age range was relatively simple this month. I read 2 middle grade books and then 14 adult books. My genres were kind of they were more spread out than they usually are. So we had 8 romance books, 1 nonfiction, 1 poetry, 1 contemporary, 1 fantasy, 1 mystery, and 3 sci-fi. And ratings, pretty normal for me. We had 3 5 stars, 10 4 stars, and 3 3 stars. So the first 4 books from the month I did in a reading vlog, which I will leave again linked above or down below if you'd like to check it out. Is basically me trying to do some last minute goal reaching. So just a few books that I had on one goal for one reason or the other for 2022, and I just hadn't really made time for it. So I started the month off with the very last book in the Bridgerton series by Julia Quinn, which is On the Way to the Wedding. This follows not the youngest sibling, but the youngest brother. He's the second to youngest. It's Gregory. He is in his mid-20s here, and his relationship with woman named Hermione. Now, Hermione, this all starts because Hermione has really, really close friends with this woman named Lucy or Lucinda. And Lucinda is kind of the picture perfect, beautiful person that everyone ends up wanting to marry. And they always come to Hermione for help, or she's very used to being looked over, and people are going to Lucy. And so that's what happens. Gregory kind of looks over her, looks to Lucy, and immediately falls in love. He's watched every single one of his siblings fall in love. He knows that love is a thing, and he's going to marry for love. That's what he's decided. And he thinks that Lucy is it. He's met the one, but something, it just isn't clicking. She's not really paying attention to him. And so he asks Hermione's help, and Hermione has her own reasons for wanting Gregory to be the one to marry Lucy. And so she and Gregory are trying to work together to try to get him on her radar. And it is their romance as well. And so this takes place over the course of a long period of time. The first half takes place over kind of a weekend, and then it jumps a month in the future, and then it takes place in London. And it was really cute. I really enjoyed it. I ended up giving this one 4.5 stars. It's definitely not my favorite in the Bridgerton series because I feel like Gregory is the sibling that I am the least connected to. The younger siblings are the ones that I feel the least connected to, because I feel like there's this gap between like the earlier siblings or the older siblings and the younger siblings, and so all the younger siblings are in each other's lives and the older siblings are in each other's lives, but there's a good 10 years between Gregory and his oldest brother Anthony, and so he was kind of the annoying younger brother. He was never really involved in the earlier books, so I don't feel as connected to the younger siblings as I do the older siblings. With that being said, I really enjoyed the story. It was a lot of fun. It's such a weird experience because I listened to all of these on audiobook, and the person who does it, Rosalind Landor, is one of my favorite, like I could probably say she's my favorite audiobook narrator out there. I love her, and so the fact that like I was able to jump back into the story with characters I knew, because the siblings obviously make an appearance in here, with the story I knew, kind of, with a family that I fell in love with, and just to have the comfort of having the same narrator do all of these books, it felt like you were going back to a reread that you had loved. It's one of your favorite stories, except for that the story was new to you. So it was a very strange feeling of like that feeling of comfort when you go back to a reread, except for that you didn't know the story. I still really enjoyed it. There were aspects to Gregory's character that I didn't like. There were moments when it was like he kept telling you over and over and over, you as the reader, even some of our characters within the story, that he loved so-and-so, he loved so-and-so, and he never really showed it. So it was more like the author was trying to convince you through words that Gregory loved somebody, but it was like, okay, that's great, but you don't need to keep telling me. Now I'm getting annoyed by the fact that you keep telling me over and over and over again, show me that he loves her, you know? And so there were aspects to his character that I was like, okay, there's a lot happening here. But overall, I still really enjoyed this, and I gave it 4.5 stars. And then I did the next 2 books in the Mallory series. So we have The Magic of You and Say You Love Me. So these 2 books take place, I think they are 4 and 5 in the Mallory series, if I am correct. And it goes The Magic of You and then Say You Love Me. I'm going to try to talk about them together because my thoughts are pretty similar. The Magic of You follows Amy Mallory, which is a cousin. This family basically has 4 siblings and a bunch of their kids, and then one of these siblings marries an Anderson, and so the Anderson family is now connected to this family. But we have Amy Mallory, who is set on one of the Anderson brothers. She's convinced that like this, she's kind of set her eye on this one guy, and she's like, this is the one that I'm going to marry. And he has had some issues with women in the past. He's kind of been burned in the past, and he has no interest in her, but like she keeps appearing, and it's their relationship. And then in this book, we have one of the Mallory siblings, Derek, who and Amy and Derek are cousins. And Derek is kind of thought of as like, he's like a rake. He never really settles down. He's not really interested in that. He's just kind of like chilling, you know? And he ends up going to this club of sorts, and there happens to be an auction taking place. So we follow him and then our main female lead, Kelsey, which was real fun trying to read this book and having the main character be Kelsey in this book. And she basically comes from a relatively good family, but they've run out of money. Her uncle basically like presents this option to her of like being sold as a mistress, and then the guy is gonna like pay off whatever debt that needs to happen. And so this happens, and there's this guy that's a really, really bad guy, does not take care of women, and he's the one who bids on Kelsey. And Derek is like, we're not doing that. I don't really want a mistress, but I don't want her in his hands because he is terrible. And so he ends up paying for her. It's a real weird situation, and then it's their romance. So this one ends up giving 4 stars. I really liked the story of Amy, and then the Anderson brother is Warren. He was really fun. I mean, he's a grouch, but like it's kind of a sunshine and grumpy romance, just a little bit, because she is very set in her ways, and she's very much like, you're the one I'm going to marry. I'm going to tell you up front that you're the one I'm going to marry. And he's like, please leave me alone. And the banter in here really made it. It was a lot of fun. I started it not thinking too much of it because the last couple of books have not kind of lived up to the first book I read in the series. It's actually the second in the series, but the first one I read from this family still is my favorite, and this one is a very close second. Like, I really enjoyed their banter. I thought it was fun. He's a grouch, but like he's definitely a lovable grouch. With this one, I didn't feel connected to the characters. I felt like, and maybe it was the whole like being sold into being a mistress. It was really bizarre situation, and I think I've read books like this. It also ended very abruptly, so like not abruptly, but in a very aggressive manner. So I would say trigger warnings for this one for like sexual abuse. a lot of it, and it's just it's a topic. It's a topic within this book, and like our main character gets into a situation, or I guess gets forced into a situation where it's not great, and it takes a turn. So there are just aspects of this that I didn't like. The very beginning I liked, and the very end I liked, but the middle part I was like, do I really believe them? I don't know. So not my favorite one, but I ended up reading the first half of the Mallory series because of this, and that was good. So there was a good one. I got a good one out of it, and then an okay one. The next one and the last one that rounded out this vlog was One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston. So I ended up giving this one, I think I gave it 4.5 stars. Yes, I gave this one 4.5 stars. I quite enjoyed it. I still think Red, White, and Royal Blue is my favorite by this author out of the two that I've read, but this one is definitely really, really good, and definitely is like, has all those sweet romance vibes, but like really packs a punch at the same time. So we're following our two main characters, August and Jane. It's in August's perspective, and she has moved to New York City basically to kind of start over. She's in school, but she's never really found like what she wants to do. She kind of has a, I wouldn't say strained, but an interesting relationship with her mother, and they talk all the time, but her mom is very focused on finding her lost brother, and has kind of pulled August along with this, and August is like, okay, fine, but she still needs to live her own life. And so she ends up getting this apartment with a bunch of people and really starts to find like a community. And then one day on a train, she runs into this woman named Jane, and they really kick it off. But there's something about her that's very like, she has this very like 70s grunge style. I always say 70s, but I feel like it's actually the 80s. But like this very 80s grunge style. And we find out throughout the course of the book that it's actually, she's from the 80s and she's been stuck on this train for so many years, and they're trying to figure out what happened to her, how she got stuck on the train, who she is, how to get her off the train as August starts to fall for her. And so it's a beautiful story about coming into your own. It really shows August figuring out what she wants to do with life, because she's always put off graduating, and in this book she's kind of confronted with the idea of like, hey, if you finish one more class, you're good, like you can graduate. And she's like, I don't know what to do with that. And so what does she do in the future? What is she pushed into doing because of her mom? What does she actually enjoy doing? She finally finds a place where she can stay. She's comfortable with her friends. She's finally found friends. She's never really had those before, as well as falling in love with someone and having this person kind of force her to be who she is, and to have her like true self kind of come out. And I loved it because it follows two such messy people that are so perfect for each other that you can see how the imperfections are still there, and that's okay, and they're gonna work through whatever issues they have, but like they're so okay with being messy. Like this is just a messy romance in like the best way possible. So I loved it. I loved all the rep within this book because we do have quite a few. Obviously our main character is bi. We have Jane, who is a lesbian. We've got a trans character. We've got a drag queen in this book. We've got a male-male romance couple. Like there's every single rep that you can possibly think of probably within this book. And I loved that because it wasn't forced. It was very much like these characters are just gonna be here and living their life, and this is the story we're telling. And I really enjoyed that part of it. So I loved it. I thought it was super, super sweet. Again, not my favorite by this author, but I still like, it still got 4.5 stars. It's still really, really high up there for me. The next one is going to be really weird to talk about because I don't really know how to. And that is this poetry collection, which is called Evolution. It's one that Chris picked for me in my TBR game that I made him pick for me, and it's actually written by a family friend. So this is by Kimmy Bennings. It's not on Goodreads, so it's very, very, like, very self-published. I'm giving this one 3 stars because poetry is such a weird thing to rate for me, because there's a lot in here about relationships and being Black in America and dealing with love and loss and all these kinds of topics that some are going to hit harder to me than others, and that's what poetry is about. So I gave it 3 stars because I loved the writing. I loved diving back into poetry for the first time in a very long time. I love that it was a family friend that I got to read this from, but not every single experience in here is going to relate to me, and that's totally fine. So again, I don't know how to talk about a poetry collection because it's so different. It's a collection of a bunch of different ideas, and it feels very personal. It is a very personal experience for you to read poetry, but it felt even more personal because I knew the author. So also this is like it's quite a few years old. This book came out in 2002, so it's been a hot second. But I don't know, there's just a lot in here that it was very good, but I don't know how to talk about it, and I also don't know how to talk about it because I know it's not going to be a book that many people are going to be able to access. So like I don't want to like hype it up because it's literally self-published. She made this in her own house. So yeah, that's a really weird way. I don't know. I just don't know how to talk about it. I loved it. The moral of the story is I loved it, and poetry is fun, and I was glad that I was able to dive back in to poetry by reading Family Friends. And now we're going to dive into the Christmas books. There's 4 here that I ended up reading. Some of these made it into, I think the first 3 made it into my cozy Christmas holiday vlog, which I will leave linked above and down below if you'd like to check it out. But this is where my Christmas reading really kind of starts, and that starts with a novella, which is The Wallflower Christmas by Lisa Kleypas. This is the last book in a series. It follows the series, which is called the Wallflower series by Lisa Kleypas, which follows 4 friends, each of their respective romances. They're considered wallflowers. They decide to kind of take matters into their own hands and kind of come together to be friends and also to like help each other out with love. This takes place after all 4 of those books. 2 of these girls are sisters, and so this follows the brother of them. And it's around Christmas, and he comes to England. They're all American, the sisters and their family is. So they come to England basically to find husbands. And so the brother, Rafe, comes to England because his father is basically like, you want to stake in the company that I've got going on? That's great. You have to marry this very specific person. And so he's basically come to England to kind of scope out who she is, figure out if this is something that he can actually do, if he's comfortable, you know, getting married to her. And her companion, who is her cousin, comes over to kind of like feel the waters of who he is, see if he's right for her cousin, and then it's the 2 of them and their relationship over the course of like a week or so. And I really enjoyed it. I ended up giving this one 5 stars. It was a lot of fun. It was a really quick read. You do have to have read, I think you do have to have read the previous books because it's a fun romance, but like throughout this book, you get small moments with all 4 of our couples that we've come to know very well through the past books, and those moments aren't going to mean anything if you haven't read any of the other books. So sometimes you can, especially with historical romance, you can read them out of order, or you can read random things without having read the rest, and like technically you can read this and still enjoy it, but I think you would get way more enjoyment if you have read the rest of the series because of all of those sweet moments. You get to see the wallflowers really be the wallflowers and kind of rally behind this woman and get their brother to fall, like basically get to the woman that he has fallen for. And it's super quick, it's super sweet, it didn't take too long. For a novella, you do kind of have to rush the romance, but I did feel like even though it was rushed for how small this book is, it still felt pretty realistic as far as the romance goes. I really liked them as a couple. I thought they were super cute, and it was just a lot of fun. So that was a fun little way to like dive back into, or really dive into all of my Christmas reads. I then followed that up with my favorite book of the month, which is The Matzah Ball by Jean Meltzer. Now I'm obsessed with this author and I want to read all things by her. This is a Hanukkah romance. It follows our main 2 characters, Rachel and Jacob. And Rachel is a Christmas romance novelist. She has chronic fatigue syndrome, so she's a chronic illness that kind of keeps her at home. So she needs a job like writing that's very remote, and you know, she can kind of create her own schedule so she can be down and for the count and rest for a few days to kind of rally the strength to do the things that she needs to do. And so the beginning of this book, her publisher basically comes to her and is like, all right, well, your last book didn't do too hot, so we've decided not to continue with any more Christmas romances from you. However, we know that you are Jewish and we want you to write a Hanukkah romance. And she's like, I don't even know how to do that. Christmas is full of fun and like sparkly lights and like romantic moments, and Hanukkah's not. I don't know how to do that. And so she reconnects with this guy named Jacob, who was her summer camp rival of sorts. They kind of had a thing when they were younger, but it ended badly, and he's back in town to produce what's called the Matzah Ball. It's this kind of really long, week-long kind of extravaganza that culminates in the Matzah Ball, and it's his way of basically bringing the Jewish heritage and Hanukkah to the forefront of the holidays. And it's like his way of basically giving the Jewish community a really great place and a really fun ball to go to. And so she basically connects with him to hopefully get a ticket to the Matzah Ball so that she can maybe find a moment to write a Hanukkah romance. And it's super sweet. It's the two of them. There's so much more to it than that. Obviously, we've got her, and she's dealing with a chronic illness. She comes from a very high up family within the Jewish community. Her father is a rabbi, and so everybody knows her. So the fact that she is a novelist is hidden, and not many people know that she is chronically ill because she doesn't want people's pity and just the way that people usually think and look at her once they do find out. She doesn't want that. So really it's only her family and like her best friend who knows, not even her publisher or editor know anything about that. And so we've got that, and then we've got him, and he's dealing with a lot with his family. His mother was also chronically ill at some point, and he's a really, really strained relationship with his father. So within this book, I would say trigger warnings for, there is mentions of suicide. It's not on the page. It's more just like conversations of how someone was feeling a while ago, and then death of a parent as well. I loved this. It was so good because it had those moments of realness and real conversations, but it still had all of the cozy vibes that you want from a romance book. It has all of the ups and the downs that you expect from a romance book, but it has a lot more conversation mixed within. And I thought it was really good because it meshed those two things really well together, the serious conversations as well as the fun romance. And I could not put this down. All I wanted to do was read this book. I am obsessed. I told everyone I could possibly tell to read this book because I just wanted people to know it was so good. I highly, highly recommend, and I will be looking more into things by this author because this is an own voices story. The author is Jewish as well as chronically ill herself, which is why she became a novelist, and I love it. I loved it, and I'm obsessed, okay? I need to read all the things by her. And she literally only has one other thing currently out, so yeah. Oh, it was so good. I gave it 5 stars. I don't know if I said that already, but I gave it 5 stars. Clearly. I followed that up with just a very short ebook that I'd seen around. It was like really popular last year. I think it came out last year, but I might have made that up. And that is Dipped in Holly by Dana Isley. This is the first in the Nick and Holly series. I believe there's like 6 in this one. They're all short novellas surrounding a certain holiday. The second one follows Valentine's Day, so I might read it around Valentine's Day. I haven't really decided yet. These are really just short, smutty novellas. That's all there is to it. The story follows Holly, who is basically just got broken up with by her very, very long time boyfriend, and in a bar, and is crying in the bathroom. And the bar owner comes in to basically see like if she's okay. That's Nick. And she ends up spending the night, literally spending the night with him. Like they hang out, they talk at the bar, and then they end up going up to his apartment above the bar. And that's it. The story is basically them starting a fling. He is a little bit older, so I think there is an age gap within this because she's always talking about his like salt and pepper beard and stuff. But it was cute. I mean, it had its moments. I ended up giving it 3 stars. Let's start there. As I've said many times on this channel, I don't mind a smutty book. I actually really enjoy them. My thing is I need a story with that, and there really wasn't a story. There was somewhat of a plot, but this was so short that the story was just kind of like there to prove a point as to why these characters would meet, but the real point of the story was obviously the smutty scenes, which is fine. I, again, didn't mind that, which is why I got 3 stars. It was okay. It was just, I think it lacked some of the real story for me, which I'm not even sure how you would fix that with a novel like this short. I expected it to be longer than it was. Like, I think I ended up getting it on Kindle, and I think I was at like the halfway point, and that's when the book technically stopped, and then the rest of it was like all the promotional stuff that comes with ebooks. And so I expected it to be longer than it was, and then all of a sudden it just kind of stopped. And it was a very abrupt ending, and I know the point of it is just a little bit of fun for these characters, and I'm interested in their romance in a sense because I have kind of looked into the rest of the books in the series, and it shows them like basically getting into a relationship. and I think that would be interesting. I'm curious to see what else is here, but I don't know. I thought it would be interesting. I saw a lot of people read it last year. It's just a quick little smutty novella I could squeeze in between other things, and that's what I did. So it was fine. I mean, there wasn't anything amazing about it, but I'm not sure there can be anything amazing about it when it is as short as it is. I followed that up with another great book, which I gave 4 stars, and that is The Christmas Escape by Sarah Morgan. This one is all fun, cozy, cold, icy goodness. I loved every second of it. This follows our 2 main characters, Christy and Alex, and I expected this story to basically just follow Alex's romance, and then Christy was kind of like a side character that really got the plot in motion. I really expected this to be just a fun, fluffy romance, and it's not. Well, I mean, it is. It does have its romantic moments, but it's so much more serious than that. It's really about these 2 friends continuing their friendship. And like, it's been 5 years since Christy got married, and it's just showing their relationship has changed in those 5 years because life happens. People get married, people have kids. Your friendships are going to change over the course of the years, and it really shows these 2 friends who are really adamant about not, like, basically continuing to be friends, not letting these things get in the way. So the story kind of starts with Christy, and she discovers that her husband and her kind of having some issues, and so she sends her best friend Alex and her daughter up to the Laplands, which is this, I think it's in I don't remember where exactly it is. I always want to say it's in like Denmark or something, and I think that's wrong. It's like at the top, it's like cold. It's the cold. And Christy has an aunt up there that she's never really talked to, and so she's going there for Christmas to basically meet the aunt. But she needs to kind of clear the air with her husband, so she sends her best friend up there with her daughter, and then also one of the husband's best friends ends up going as well. And Alex and this guy have had a interesting backstory, and so it's the 2 of them basically being forced into like a 1-bed kind of situation where they're taking care of this child. And Alex has some issues with her parents and her past, so she's very hesitant about relationships. So you've got that whole thing of like building walls, and he's trying to break them down. And then you also have this conversation between Christy and her husband as they're trying to figure out, you know, they very quickly got married. They found out that she was pregnant. They'd only really been seeing each other for a few weeks. They found out that she was pregnant and immediately got married. So it's the 2 of them kind of really talking about a lot of problems that they should have been talking about since day 1, and they just didn't. So you really have 2 romantic plot lines happening at the same time, but throughout both plot lines, it's really these girls thinking, or these women thinking about their relationship with the other one, and like the friendships and how they've changed and how they can be better friends. And it's really very, very sweet. It's feel good. It has its moments. I wasn't really sure what to expect because the first few chapters were just kind of okay. And then once Alex got to, Alex and I think it was Zach is the guy's name. Yeah, Alex and Zach get up to the Laplands. That's when the story really takes place and keeps going. And I really enjoyed it. So much. I would say it's more contemporary than romance, but it does have its romantic elements, and it was just fun. And if you want a book that's set in like a nice, cozy, cold, like you want that cold vibe, so like you are fine, you're nice and warm with a blanket, but the book you're reading about takes place in the snow, this is what you want, because basically once it gets to Laplands, it's all snow, all Arctic, all fun, all the time. So yeah, I loved it. The next one, is one that is an Audible original kind of remake of an old radio show. It's one of the ones that Chris had on his list for me, and that's The Cinnamon Bear. And it's by Eric Gilland, but it's a full cast recording. It's an Audible exclusive, and it basically is the story of The Cinnamon Bear, which was an old serialized radio show that used to be on. I don't know actually when it was on, but the story basically follows his brother and sister whose star, the silver star that goes on top of their Christmas tree, goes missing. And they go up in the attic trying to figure out what's going on, what's happening, and the Cinnamon Bear kind of comes to life and takes them to this other world where they're trying to figure out where their star went. And it's them on the adventure to find the star. It's like a 20 episode serialized thing, but each episode, I think the longest one was like 15 minutes. Like they're not very long at all. And it was really fun because, again, full cast recording. You've got the same characters, but then you've also got random characters that show up throughout, and their names that, like, you should, if you're interested, you should look up the entire like cast, because almost every single one of them I knew from something. Not all of them, but almost everyone I would look up and go, oh yeah, I know who that is. I just didn't like recognize their name or something. And so it's just a lot of fun people to play all of these characters, and it was a lot of fun because it has that very cutesy, like, we're going on an adventure, there's something wrong, let's solve our problems, like you would expect for kids, but it does have a lot of jokes in there for adults as well, for people who maybe grew up with a Cinnamon Bear and are now seeing like the remake of it. And it just has a lot of fun jokes throughout. Like, I definitely laughed out loud at least once an episode, if not more. I rated the whole thing 4 stars because it definitely got very repetitive after a while, but like it did it in a way that like the story, like something would go wrong, let's fix it, yay, we fixed it, oh no, something else would go wrong, and it would be like that repetitive, but like they would do it in a way that like the characters are very self-aware, and so like even the sister was like multiple times, we've done this before, why does this keep happening? And so they would make jokes about the fact that things would be repetitive, and that made it enjoyable. So near the end I was definitely ready for it to be over, but at the same time I really enjoyed every second of it, and it was just a lot of fun. And it was just this fun little Christmassy story that can be, you know, it was really good. It was goofy, but it had its moments. And then I think this is the last of my Christmas reads, and that is Kiss Her Once for Me by Alison Cochrane. This one I gave 5 stars to. I basically read this entire book on Christmas Eve. I read the first couple of chapters before then, but on Christmas Eve was a very relaxing day. I didn't really have anything I needed to do. I basically sat in the couch in my in-laws' house, and I read by the fire all day. And like, I did have the audiobook in my ear, but I physically read this entire book, and I haven't sat down and read physically an entire book in a long time. Like, I know that I always have like mixed things where like I'll be listening and reading at the same time, but I always get distracted, so that's why I like the audiobooks, because it'll keep me focused on the story even while my hands are distracted doing something else, even if I'm not reading. Whereas this book, I read the entire book physically with my eyes. I just happened to have the audiobook in my ear, and I loved this book. I thought it was so fun. I didn't really know what to expect going in, and it was amazing. So there are a couple of trigger warnings. We do have toxic parents as well as biphobia, and then just some rep that I noticed. There's a bunch in here, but we have social anxiety. Our main character suffers from severe social anxiety, and while I can't really speak on the rep in that sense, I did read a few sections to my husband who does suffer from social anxiety himself, and he was like, that's me. So I know it's pretty good rep on some levels. And then also our main character is demisexual. So this follows our 2 main characters, well, one main character, Ellie, and she on Christmas Eve a year ago, I think this takes place, like, there are actual dates in here. So last Christmas, as of like, it was so weird because like, okay, sorry, I'm getting way off topic here. This book was written to be told in December of 2022. So like, the dates in here align. So like, I was reading it and you're looking at like the year, and I'm looking at the calendar, and we're getting close to the times of the year, and it's like December 26th is a Monday, and I was like, December 26th is a Monday this year. And so it was very strange to be reading it at the time that it was actually set, because there's one thing to read Christmas books around Christmas, it's another to have it set in that exact year. That was a little trippy. So this story follows our main character, Ellie, and a year ago, she runs into this woman on Christmas Eve in a bookstore, and they strike up a conversation and really just basically spend the entire night together. They like go to a bunch of different places. They travel across, it's set in Portland, so they travel across the city, and Ellie has just gotten a job at I can't remember what it's called, but like, she's basically an illustrator, and she's working at this like firm, and she's only been there for a month, and she's really excited, and she runs into this woman that she thinks that she's really, you know, fallen for. She's convinced she's fallen in love in one night for this woman. So it does have a little bit of insta love in there. And then something happens on Christmas, and they end up kind of not speaking anymore. And we don't know what it is as the readers for a while, but it follows her on this Christmas, and she and this guy named Andrew, I believe, he's from like a pretty wealthy family, and he owns the building where the coffee shop that she works is located. And she's really struggling because her mom is really, really toxic and only wants her for money, and it's a very tough situation. And so her mom does not understand that she literally does not have enough money to like rub pennies together, and her mom's over here asking for hundreds of dollars. I could rant about this mother for forever. She's kind of in a situation where she really needs money, and Andrew's in a situation where he is going to get some inheritance from a family member, but in order to do so, he has to be married. And so they basically strike up this bargain of they'll get married, they'll be married for a year, he'll give her some of the money and keep a lot of it for himself, and he has very specific reasons as to why he needs it, and that way she can have money and they can be married, and like he'll help her out for about a year and then they'll divorce after that. But to convince his family, she ends up going with him to Christmas in the mountains, and we find out when she gets there that the woman that she fell head over heels in love with in a bookstore is actually his sister. And so it's just a hodgepodge mess, but I loved it because there's a lot of moments within here where you're seeing the characters really come together, because you've got Ellie, you've got Andrew, you've got this woman named Jack, and it's very adult in the sense of like Jack kind of is very abrupt about things, and so she'll confront Ellie a few times and go, we are going to talk about this situation, whatever it is, we're going to talk about it. We're not going to let miscommunication really be a thing, even though it's kind of a thing within this book. It's more like Jack doesn't know that there's a bargain between Ellie and Andrew, and that Ellie is marrying Andrew for a very specific reason. And so there's a miscommunication in the sense of that. It's more just like Ellie's not telling people. But Jack's very like abrupt. She's very gonna make herself heard, and so she goes about conversations very direct in the sense of like, there is no chance that we could have an issue. We're going to communicate like adults about this. And that was really fun to read about. It's a super messy romance. One thing that I did find really interesting about the story was the way that Jack is described. Ellie describes Jack in a way that is imperfectly perfect, if that makes sense. So like there's a lot of times throughout this book that Ellie will describe Jack's laugh, and Jack has a very abrupt guffaw of a laugh, and it's not stereotypically beautiful laugh. It's kind of out there all over the place, but Ellie finds that laugh charming about Jack because it's so imperfect, because Jack is such a crazy, outlandish kind of person that of course she would have a laugh like this, and Ellie loves that about her. And so it's moments like that where she's described in a way that's like, okay, some things about her are not going to be picture perfect, but Ellie doesn't mind, and it's that imperfectly perfect kind of situation where like the imperfections are what make you perfect, and you can really see that coming across. I just think that Ellie has a very fantastic and unique way of looking at some of the characters from this book, especially Jack. So that was really fun. But I just literally, I could not stop reading. I was invested in these characters. You really fall for not only our main three characters, but also like there's a bunch of family members within here that you really fall for. And you see Ellie, this is a conversation about failure as well, or this book has a conversation about failure of Ellie is afraid to fail at anything, so she just doesn't try. And so if something starts to go wrong, she's like, all right, fine, we're just not going to even do that anymore. And Jack can't do that. And so there's just a lot of conversation with Ellie kind of figuring out herself as well. I don't know, there was just a lot of really cool moments within this book. I loved the romance. I thought it was beautiful. I couldn't stop reading. Literally read this in almost one entire day. So I am obsessed. The next one that I read was my nonfiction for the month, one that Chris picked out for me, and that is The Office BFF by Jenna Fisher and Angela Kinsey. This is a book by two women who were in the show The Office, the American version. They played Angela and Pam, and it's their story told through photos. So you have them talking, there's unseen photos of people on set. It's their conversations of what they remember from being in the office. And I really loved it. I ended up giving this one 4 stars because it had so many cool stories of these two women and their story and how they got on The Office and their time on The Office and their friendship and how it, evolved over the years. I will say these two women have a podcast, which is The Office Ladies. It's really, really popular. I'm sure many people have heard of it if you were an Office fan. And there's a lot in here that is, when it's specifically the show related, especially early on, there's a lot of chapters that are dedicated to certain stories within the show, and I would bring up something about the book to my husband, who has listened to every single one of these episodes, and he would know the story. So there's definitely aspects later on in the book, once the series is over, they kind of talk about their friendship, how it's molded and changed over the years, as well as like what's next once The Office was over. And I think those aspects are probably different, but if you are an avid listener to the podcast, I feel like a lot of the stories within this book are not going to be original to you. They might be embellished on a little bit more than maybe was mentioned in a podcast, but there's a lot of stuff in this book that they've probably already talked about. So I don't know how different the stories are going to be, and how, I guess, not beneficial, but like just kind of go into this book knowing that if you've listened to the podcast and you know a lot of the behind the scenes stories, some of the earlier things are going to be things you probably already know about. But I, on the other hand, had not listened to every single episode, so a lot of these, actually almost all these stories, were original. There was a few things that I did happen to know just from having a husband who's a huge fan, but a lot of the stories in here were new to me, so I loved it. I loved seeing them as women who were trying to make it in comedy, go from like nobodies to somebodies, and then also, you know, what's next. How do you be a mom? How do you be, you know, a family person in a career that doesn't really allow you to have that kind of time? And how does that work? And that was really fascinating to me. I really enjoyed their stories. I just loved it, especially because I listened to the audiobook and it was the two of them talking to each other and doing it. And I loved it. I don't know. I thought it was fun. Okay. It was great. The next book is the last one that was on the list of 4 books that Chris picked for me for the month of December. It was a middle grade, and that is Last Shot by John Feinstein. This is the first in a series of Sports Beat. That's what it's called. And it's basically, I think, the same 2 kids doing a bunch of different reporting on a bunch of different sports, and they meet in this book. So it follows Stevie and Susan, who are reporters at their respective elementary schools, or not elementary, middle schools. And they win a contest, and then basically they go to the Final Four and write a story at the Final Four, get behind the scenes passes. They get to go into like the news reporters box and really just kind of hang out with reporters. And while they are there, they uncover a blackmailing scandal of one of the players. And so it's the 2 of them who don't really know each other start to really become friends as they're trying to help out one of the star athletes who is being blackmailed and kind of figure out what's going on. So this one I ended up giving 4 stars to. I can't remember if I've said that already, but it is really interesting. It had its moments. I definitely laughed out loud multiple times during this because he's just a really funny writer. I will say this one suffered from the fact that I don't understand basketball very much. Like, it's one of the sports that I know the least about. So if we did, like, I think he has a story on soccer that Chris says I might enjoy a little bit more, because I enjoyed the writing. I loved the story of these 2 kids kind of figuring out what's going on and solving a mystery, which was really, really fun, especially from a reporter's lens, which was really cool. But there was moments where, like, he's describing, because it's from Stevie's perspective, so he's describing like players practicing, and I'm like, that is kind of boring to me. I don't really care how they're practicing. I want to know more about the blackmailing story or whatever. So there's definitely aspects of this that I was like, you know. But what I found really interesting is that he writes how my husband thinks, and it was really bizarre situation, and I could totally tell why Chris liked these books so much. And I'm sitting there reading this and I'm like, that sounds like Chris. That sounds like Chris. That sounds like Chris. It was so bizarre in like the best way because of that aspect. Like, I could just tell why this book was one of his favorites, and I laughed out loud multiple times, and then I'd have to like share what part I was laughing out loud at. And the mystery elements were really great. I found the kids kind of fun to follow. It was interesting also because, like, this is exactly how a middle school boy thinks. Because I would read situations and Chris was like, yeah, no, I can attest that that's how a middle school boy thinks. And it's just some of the situations, like something very simple that I can think off the top of my head is when Stevie meets Susan, he's just like not interested, not at all care about her. He's actually kind of annoyed that she's a girl and she's there. And then throughout the story, he finds himself maybe like thinking she's pretty, and she goes, for a girl, you know, or something like that. And it was just really funny, because you can tell that's like definitely a middle school boy thought process of like, oh, girls are gross, but I like this one. I think this one's pretty, but girls are gross. And it's that whole situation, which is kind of fun. There's more to like other elements of it as well, but that's what stuck out to me as like a good example. I definitely enjoyed it. I thought it was a lot of fun. And I can see why he likes them. And then the last three I'm going to do together because they're all part of the same series, and that's volumes 4, 5, and 6 of Descender. I decided to finish out the year by finishing this series, and I'm confused. So all three of these got 4.5 stars. I loved diving back into this world. I really was only going to read one. I thought I had an afternoon kind of free on the last day of the year. I was just going to get through one. It was going to be kind of fun. It had a cliffhanger, so I picked up the second one. It had a cliffhanger, so I finished it thinking this would be fine, and it also had a cliffhanger. So I don't even know where to think now, but now I need to dive back into the Ascender series now, because like it has a very abrupt ending and then jumps to like 10 years in the future with some of the characters in here, their kid. And so the spinoff, like I said, is Ascender. There's 4 volumes there, and it follows her, like this kid. I don't know what the story is, but we follow this kid. And yeah, so I don't know how to talk about this because, again, it's the second half of a series that has a lot of twists and turns, but I really enjoyed it. It does have the same vibes of the Famous Files series, which I've said before, which is one that I do love that series a whole lot. This is definitely probably worth a reread in the future. I loved it so much. I want to dive in and see if I can pick up on things, because the ending was, again, so abrupt. Like, I know what happened, but I'm still in disbelief that what happened, and I feel like I don't have any answers. I think we're going to get answers in the Ascender volumes. So maybe I should add Ascender to the list of books that I want to read in 2023, because, like, I need answers, and I'm afraid to leave too much time between this series and that one, because, again, this ending, what happened? But this series, maybe I should tell you a little bit about this series. It follows our main character, which is Tim 21. He is what's called a companion robot, and that basically means that he was built to be a companion for whatever reason, or like for different reasons. And he was sent to this like moon planet and was the companion for a young boy named Andy. Now, this book starts about that time with these things they've been called the Harvesters, and there were these big robots that just showed up and started destroying things and then disappeared. And it's been 10 years since then, and Tim had been turned off for those 10 years, but he comes back online and has discovered that there's something in his code that is the same code as these Harvesters. And a small group is sent out to find him and bring him back to like the head Galactic League kind of people. And we're not sure exactly why he's wanted, but they want to study him and figure out kind of what's going on. There's also smaller groups out there to get him. Some of them are called what are they called? Scrappers, which basically is exactly what it sounds like. They find robots and basically scrap them for parts to get money. So you've got a couple of smaller groups that are scrappers looking for him as well. Like, there's a few people looking for this kid, and it's his story as he's trying to figure out why he's wanted. Why does his code match up with these big things? What are these big things? And he's starting to learn about the universe as a whole. And he's also this really just sweet little boy that just doesn't want to hurt anybody, and I just think he's adorable. I just love him so much, and I loved this series. Again, I think I need to reread it because it was like, I just finished it and I'm already like want to dive back in and go back to it because I just want to protect Tim with everything. So I love him. He's very sweet. I'm very glad that I did actually get around to this. I was hoping to finish it this year, but I ended up finishing it last year, which was exciting. So yeah, I finished out the year by finishing a series, which was a lot of fun. And again, I still have so many conflicting feelings. And that's it. That is everything that I read in December. I finished out the year on a pretty high note, I will say. I'm pretty proud of how I did. So now I can dive into all of my stats and fun stuff, which we'll do in the next video as far as like the stats for the year and also like just a look at all of my reading. because that's just a fun video that I like to do. It's a pain to edit, but I'm very excited about it. So stay tuned for that video. But I hope that you guys enjoyed this one. Please let me know if, as always, you've read any of the books that I mentioned in this video, or maybe some of your last reads for 2022. Did you end the year on a high note? Was there fun reads? Was there sad reads? I don't know. Tell me your reads that you finished out the year with. But if you like this video, and I very much hope that you did, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe down below if you'd like to be part of this awesome growing family. I've also got all my social media down there, as well as other fun bookish links, so check all that out, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!